Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this breakout group. Uklama Shishikwalap Histak Shilhoet Nuchanathat. My name is Angela Wesley. I'm from the Ho'et First Nation on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Very happy to be asked to facilitate this panel. It was a little bit last minute, but I was coming here anyway, so was thrilled to come and listen to the great panel that you have in front of you today. I have to tell you, I feel a little inadequate after the youth that I heard this morning. Shout out to them, our future is bright. This panel, Indigenous Laws, Legal Traditions and Rights, I think is really top of mind for all of us in our modern treaty nations as we try to continue to move forward while looking back into our past and bringing, in my community, we say our ancient spirit and our modern mind together and continue to make our governments useful and meaningful to us in our way. So I'm really glad to be joined by a panel of wonderful people here today. When you're outside of your own territory, your biggest fear is that you're going to mispronounce things, so please forgive me in advance, all of you. So we have three sets of presenters. We have three individuals from the Trondequitchin government. We will be hearing from Rhea Luthwaite, the Director of Implementation, Katie Fraser, the Natural Resource Policy Advisor, and Eve DeWald. Sorry, I didn't get your title. Pardon me? Policy Advisor. Thank you very much. Following their presentation, we'll be joined by Crystal Moulton, Ishkahitan Judicial Council, Clan Representative from the Karkras-Tagish First Nations. And our final presentation will be blessed to hear once again from David Joe. Always a great pleasure. So with that, I'm going to invite our panel members to come up and begin their presentations. For the three of you, I'll just have you coordinate your presentation as is. They have a PowerPoint for you. So thank you again, and looking forward to hearing from our presenters.
In the back. Oh, yeah. Drin Hozo, everyone. Shodre Rhea Luthwaite, Trondequitchin, Diche, Jur Diche, Trondequitchin, and Tredahukai. Good day, everyone. My name is Rhea Luthwaite. I'm the Implementation Director for Trondequitchin First Nation. I'm a Wolf Clan, and I'm a Trondequitchin citizen. Thank you for having us today and speaking to a really important topic. That's something that is very close to our hearts and the work that we do. And we're here to talk about Nihon Dek Dida Honlai around our stories and our Indigenous laws. And this is more like a bit of an overview around how the Trondequitchin have been working towards revitalising our traditional laws. And so just going forward. So the Trondequitchin First Nation, we're a northern community. We're self-governing and modern treaty holders. We are roughly about 1,100 citizens inside and outside of our community. We are also the descendants of the Han-speaking people and also comprise of Northern Shoshone and Gwich'in across the north and parts of Alaska. We signed our treaty, our comprehensive land claim and our self-government agreement in 1998. And since that date, we've been working towards self-governance and through self-determination. And that also includes executing our lawmaking authorities under Section 13 of our self-government agreement. So as the Trondequitchin, like most Indigenous peoples, we're an oral culture and our stories are foundational to our laws and our Dinaju laws. And they're passed down through generation to generation. And as many of you will relate, including Hake Taylor over there, who often mentions us in meetings, that our traditional stories are often what we and our community has always done through millennia to really scare our children into learning how to behave in the world. And this is something, because we are an oral culture, we wanted to share with you a bit about Sa Wetse, the beaver man, around the importance through stories and the connection with Dinaju law. So the Sa Wetse beaver man, the traveller throughout our stories, teaches lessons on how to live in Trehu Day, which is our way of life. Sa Wetse, whom the medicine being, restored balance on earth for humans and animals and all that is connected. He taught us that the core values that we live by today. Sa Wetse is also known by many names up and down the Yukon River and across the north. Sa Wetse went into the world and made it safe for us, the Dinaju, the people of this land, the people of this river. He made agreements with the land and the animals that ensured our survival. The land and the animals would provide us as long as we lived for us, as long as we lived in those agreements, for as long as we lived Trehu Day. So we just wanted to speak more about Dinaju law and Trehu Day. So for us, this is something that has always existed. It is as long as we can remember that we've lived and we've had traditional legal systems and traditional laws through Dinaju law that has existed whether or not we were self-governing. And when we returned to self-governance post the agreements being signed in 1998. And basically, we see this in our community in many, many different forms, both then and now and in the future. And what Dinaju law means to us is maintaining a reciprocal relationship with the land. And we do this through demonstrating humility, moderation, and self-control, giving back, reciprocity, respecting the world around us in the spirit of the land, and practicing ceremony and protocol to reconcile our love of the land with our traditional way of life. And many of these principles are in the preamble of our agreements, recognising the spiritual and traditional way of life. And how we maintain balance in the community and how we maintain balance with our treaty partners and other people all around us and our neighbours. As we address conflict, we keep moving forward like the beaver man, Sa Wetse, and we keep responsibilities for ourselves first most and those around us, and self-determination. And beloved Elder Percy Henry, who passed away recently, he often spoke of we're not even animals yet. And what he speaks to is that within the Dinaju and Trehu Day way of life, we recognise that animals were our ancestors and are our ancestors, and that the land around us is the spirit. So in that way, there isn't this power over relationship. It's all interconnected. And I think that really explains the nature of Dinaju law. So the aspirations of our community, the Trondikwitchin, to revitalise our laws and this has existed for as long as we can remember. It was something that came strongly from our elders and with Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow. And we have been going about it over time, piece by piece, laying those foundations. And we've also sought out partners, with other First Nations, our neighbours. We've also created a partnership with the Indigenous Law Research Unit through the University of Victoria. And we entered into this partnership in a very out of respect and have maintained that relationship with them since 2008. And the purpose was to work with citizens and elders to unearth, restore and revitalise our traditional teachings and laws, and decolonisation of our existing laws, and to assure that future lawmaking is grounded in our values and principles. And we've continued to work with the Legal Research Unit with Uluru to build capacity within our community to carry on and leading this. And this was fundamental to the work being carried out. It was done within community. It was around increasing, we did workshops on storytelling and the methodology, and that we did it within community at the start, and then we've actually done it outside of community with story sessions over Zoom, and more recently in March of 2024, we actually took around 32 citizens from across Canada to come together in Victoria to go through this process of unearthing Diniju values within our traditional stories, to then to be able to create a framework which then can be used as a practical application and implementation in any area. And so we didn't actually have time to show this video during this presentation, but we will provide it to Envision to post it along with the other presentations. And so, we've produced quite a series of different documents that through this work since 2008, some of which will be spoken to around the Land Vision later. We have a Diniju learning journal, which is just near to completion, which we'll send out across the world to different citizens that reside outside a community. And we also have already published a storybook and sent out to citizens. But the interesting part of this process was that we actually did end up having workshops, not only with citizens, but we actually had members of the public or treaty partners who were curious and wanted to learn more around Diniju law and the Trondikwitjan ways of life. And so we had met, we've heard, from land use planning commissions, hospitals, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who have participated in this act of sharing and reciprocity around traditional law, which can, and that's been something that's been really beautiful about this whole process, is that it is not just around revitalising within our community, but then accessibility and sharing of education and with other partners. And that really is at the foundation of the Diniju way around maintaining respectful and reciprocal relationships. And so I'll just pass on to Katie now to speak to the next.
Okay, my turn. Junhozo Shojoi Katie Fraser. I am not a Trondikwitjan citizen, but I was born on Trondikwitjan territory and have lived there the vast majority of my life. And I'm very honored to work for Trondikwitjan. My title has changed since the intro, so I am a senior negotiator for NANCAC, which is Land and Environment. So I'm going to go through a little bit on how we apply a lot of what Ria talked about. And then my colleague Eve is going to take us through more of the governance realm, and I'm going to focus probably more on lands. Okay, so first the land vision, which Ria mentioned. So Trondikwitjan, which I might say TH from time to time, but I'll try not to, completed a draft of what we call the land vision in 2021 after several years of story sessions, and that's what Ria was speaking to, which was with the TH community. TH tried very hard to reach all citizens, so those that live within the territory, as well as those that live all across the world. So there were a lot of online sessions. We went to other communities to get that really important feedback. So to create the land vision itself, the team held these traditional storytelling sessions. The story would be told, like Beaverman Sawatse, then a series of questions would be asked and a discussion would be had. That whole process of hearing a story and then hearing what lessons citizens heard was recorded and then transcribed. And then the team went through all the data and coded and themed the material. And so out of that process comes these 4 key values, we call them. Integrity, respect, interconnection, and justice balance. And from those 4 key values, the land vision itself was really created. And at the center of it, as you can see, is the spirit of the land. So the intention with this land vision was to create a high-level values document that could be applied for all Trondheim government operations. And the key here is applied. The land vision is meant to be incorporated into TH policies, legislation, regulations, and procedures. But of course, as we know about storytelling and lessons, this is always evolving and always changing. So it's never, this project isn't ever over. The land vision itself is a living document that we intend to continue to work on. So now just a couple examples of how Trondheim laws and frameworks apply this land vision. We're going to run through 3 key examples, and this will be quick. There's a lot we could speak to on this, but we tried to give 1 slide each. So I'll go through the Lands Act. So this is a conceptual draft, I should say, that's being introduced into this spring General Assembly. So this is really just at the starting of the process for drafting an act. And then Eve will go through a Governance Act, as well as the Administration of Justice, which is actually more of a framework, not a policy or act yet. I was also just going to mention too, before we get into it, that it's this collective power of storytelling where the deepest lessons arise, we found. And in order to keep our laws continuing to empower Denaju values, we have to keep telling them and keep listening. So again, this is an ongoing project. It never really ends for us. So the Lands Act, upholding Trondheim relationship with the land. For many years now, we've heard loud and clear from citizens that they really want a Lands Act. They want to exert that authority to create acts on their lands that upholds TH's values and principles in Denaju. We do currently have a Land and Resources Act that was enacted in 2004 and last updated in 2007, so quite old. And at the time it was, it's fairly mirror legislation to what we had in front of us at the time. And so the intent now is to really renew this act with the land vision and with what we know now about Denaju, or what we've always known, but what we've been able to write down about Denaju values. And so bringing in those 4 key values, our intent with the Lands Act is, living with integrity means trusting the land. Living in balance means maintaining a reciprocal relationship with the land, which Ria spoke to. Living in interconnection means we cannot survive without the land. And living with respect means respect for all creation. Now, of course, it's difficult to take that and translate it into a piece of policy or act. So, what does that mean? Well, healthy ecosystems that can support Trondheim and non-human relations, availability of fish, wildlife, and plants, opportunities and ability to access and successfully harvest, which is key, from the land, and opportunities and ability to continue sharing and learning between generations. So ability to get citizens out on the land. We need infrastructure, we need camps, we need the ability to keep that momentum going for those to learn off the land.
Hi everyone, Chaudre Yves Dewald, Trondheim Implementation, Gatra de Hokai. I work for Trondheim Implementation. I'm a policy advisor. I'm also not a TH citizen. I'm from Treaty 6 territory in Saskatchewan, but I'm here to continue on giving some examples of how we've integrated these values into our pieces of legislation. So the Governance Act, we created the Act in 2022, the goal of which was to outline the systems of governance at TH and the relationships between Council, the General Assembly, and the government body. The Trondheim Governance Act must be interpreted in relation to Trondheim culture and values, Trondheim government that our citizens can trust. Trondheim values in governance result in teamwork, reliability, strength, and a government that our citizens can trust is working in their best interests. Therefore, all parts of this act should be interpreted as being derived from and in relation to the following values and principles. So integrity in governance means knowing what is fair, what is right, and upholding these truths that we sense within. Integrity at Trondheim government means doing our best for the community, our land, ourselves, knowing that it's easy to make mistakes and mistakes can help our government learn and grow. However, our goal must always be to operate under the principle of integrity. It is in working with integrity that we achieve fairness and consistency in our work. Respect in governance means all levels of governance at Trondheim are important. Every staff member contributes, every committee member, every council member plays a key role in the functioning of the government. Every person in every branch of the TH government body is deserving of respect. Respect in the Governance Act means knowing what role you play and doing that from a place of humility and generosity. It also means respecting the roles that others play in supporting the functioning of our government. Interconnection in the Governance Act outlines the ways in which different parts of TH government will operate, communicate, and interact. All aspects of the government are interconnected, just as all land is interconnected. Following the guidelines of the Governance Act allows for smooth communications and clear expectations between the parts. And finally, balance. The TH Governance Act outlines a balanced approach to the powers and responsibilities of the Trondheim government. If one part of TH government holds too much power, it decreases the ability of the other parts of the government to operate effectively. And for our government to serve our community in the best way possible, it must operate under the principle of balance. So this illustration that's shown here is a visualization of the process our laws go through before they are enacted. It's an example of the balance of powers between the branches of our government, as well as respect for citizen voices. The Trondheim Governance Act will change and grow as our government changes and grows. It's a living document designed to uphold the Trondheim values of integrity, respect, interconnection, and balance. So applying our land vision for justice. So then when it came to time to develop a plan for our administration of justice, we looked at the land vision values to guide us. We looked at the 4 core values and thought about what those values would look like in a justice system. So interconnection, being mindful that everything in the world is connected. Connection happens in many ways. We should be aware of black and white, linear, cause and effect thinking, and to support people to find belonging and their place in community and their identity. Balance in justice is working to restore balance and support people's needs rather than focusing on right or wrong and punishment. Integrity is leading with integrity, helping people to be accountable for their choices, to be responsible as members of the community, taking action to do things in the TH way, and teaching other governments and agencies what this means. Mentorship to help others contribute to a TH justice system. And respect and openness. So having trust rather than trying to control, having humility rather than using power over approaches, willingness to hear and learn from everyone and everything, taking the best knowledge available. So for example, our approach to child and family services centers around the child's responsibility to themselves and others. It respects their voice and it protects their right to continue living in a Deniju way. So then to take this just a step further, when we're beginning to create our model for justice, we created this with the land vision values as our North Star. We then created our vision and plan for justice. We also thought about Sawajay and living Trehude to protect the balance he made, and thought about what protecting balance looked like for justice specifically. And what it looked like was a system that's holistic in that it looks at things from all directions. And always strives to maintain, to bring things back into balance. So it's a system that focuses on connection and prevention by fostering connection to community and identity, the land and spirituality, and addresses underlying social and systemic issues facing our community so that our foundations are strong. It's a system that strives to intervene and restore balance where possible through alternative dispute resolution, education, and restorative practices, as opposed to punishment and incarceration. And a system that promotes reconnection and healing when things go awry and caring for people after there has been harm. And a system where it may be necessary to cut things off to maintain balance within the community. So those were just a few examples of how we are articulating Deniju laws, using Deniju values and the spirit of the land to guide us in lawmaking and assert our rights. And as we continue to go forward, we'll do so with the guidance of our elders, the voices of youth, and following in the footsteps of Satwajay, because ni hondek ni daole, our stories are our law. Thank you. Masicho.
Thank you very much to Rhea, Katie, and Eve. It's really great to see not only talking about it, but how you start to incorporate that. And that was really, really helpful. I think a lot of us are going to be looking forward to seeing the presentation and to hearing more about the great work that you're doing. So appreciate that very much. Next, we'll hear from Crystal. And same thing, I think we've all talked before about the amount of work that's going on in our communities, and how do you condense 30 years of work into 30 or 20 minutes, I think is what you said, yes. Crystal. So thank you very much, and over to you. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. How do I press play here? Which one do you do to turn it on? The red one? Oh, here we go. Good afternoon. My name is Crystal Moulton. I'm a member of the Carcross-Tagish First Nation. I'm a representative of our Judicial Council. I currently sit as our chair. I belong to the Ishkaton clan, and my clan crest is the frog. We come from a matrilineal society, so we get our clan kinship from our mothers. My education background, I have a degree in criminology, and I had hopes of one day of running off to law school, but most of my education comes from lived experiences and learning from the elders in the community. I've been helping to assist my First Nation for over 30 years in the area of law development and justice, and I'm continuing to, I don't think I'm going to be going anywhere anytime soon. Seems like every time we turn around, there is always more work to be done. And I'm just so grateful to hear the presentation from the ladies from Trondek as well, because that's kind of along the same lines as Carcross-Tagish First Nation, that we have used our traditional stories, as those were ways that these traditional ways and traditional laws used to be passed down. I also sit as a community representative for our Carcross-Tagish First Nation Family Council. I'm going to speak a little bit about our CTFN Family Act. I've also helped to assist in developing a number of other pieces of legislation. There's too much to go over today, but if anybody is interested in trying to learn a little bit more about what Carcross is doing, you're more than welcome to check out our website. Everything is all published on there. I also sat as a constitutional review. Carcross-Tagish First Nation has done 4 reviews of our Constitution since it was enacted in 1997, and most recently the final review was done in 2021. So like I said, there's been a lot of work that the First Nation has been working on, so I'm going to try and summarize as much as I can what we've been working on and share with you. And like I said, if anybody has questions later on, they're more than welcome to come and reach out to myself or to my other Judicial Council and Carcross-Tagish First Nation reps that are here with me today as well. So I'll speak a little bit about our journey, and it was brought up this morning on February 14th, 1973, Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow was presented here in Ottawa. And I'm actually honored because it was my great uncle, Dan Johnson, who was the chief of Carcross-Tagish First Nation at the time, that actually went and presented that document. So it seems though as this might be a lifelong legacy for me that was handed down to me before I was even born. So in 1997, Carcross-Tagish First Nation, like I had mentioned, passed our Constitution. And the very interesting part about this is that we moved from the traditional DIA system of chief and council, elected chief and council government, to one that was based on a traditional clan system of governance. In 2000 is when we began drafting our Carcross-Tagish First Nations family law, which is basically echoing the words of Trondek, that when we were starting to take a look at where our traditions and our traditional laws came from, they were passed down through our stories. So we began research, which took quite some time and which is very interesting. So if you take a look, we started this development in 2000. So this is even before Carcross-Tagish First Nation even signed our final and self-government agreements. And one of the things that we realized is that at the time, there was more children in Canada in foster care at that time than there ever was at the height of residential schools. And Carcross-Tagish First Nation really wanted to focus on trying to be able to help families and children that were in need. So when we did this work, there was no FTA dollars, there was no compensation money. We had to seek funding from outside sources. And our primary funder at the time was Walter Duncan Gordon Foundation, which I am very grateful to hear that they are doing treaty simulations, and I really enjoyed spending time and working with those folks as we began the development of our family law. So we did the exact same thing, and we went out and researched our stories. So I had a really great time reading over. We have a database at our First Nation of about 450 traditional stories in which we extracted our traditional values from. In 2005 is when CTFN finally ratified our agreement, and that also didn't come without hiccups. Our first vote was a no vote, and we had to go back for a second ratification vote before our agreements were passed. And I was really grateful that both my grandmother and my grandfather were the elders that signed off on our agreements at that time. So the first, we did begin working on, like I said, there's a bunch of other pieces of legislation that we did. So one was Book 1, which is a foundational document, and that's quite lengthy in itself. Which was going to be a guiding document for all other pieces of law that CTFN would enact later on. Like I had said about the focus on working on family law to start off with, and I was lucky enough to be mentored by Barry Stewart, and he was a retired territorial court judge. And one of the things that he spoke to me about when we very first started this is that the lessons have been repeated many times in the development of independent First Nations. The reliance on Western laws and processes imports Western practices which have never served our people. Changing who rules without changing the governing principles ultimately changes very little in our outcomes. So we wanted to try to come up with a way that was going to be taking away from the Western model of legislation and turning to one that is more of a traditional model. My grandma, we have a quote that we have in our act, and it says, "Our families are the beginning and future of our community. When they are strong, we are all strong." The traditional values that we outline in our Family Act outlines our traditional roles and responsibilities when it comes to caring and nurturing for our children and families. It also emphasizes on ceremonies and processes for honoring our responsibilities for nurturing our families. And as you can see on the slideshow up there, the way that we're doing it is more of a cultural way, and the other one is more of a colonial way. If you were to take a territorial government act and put a Carcross-Tagish First Nation name on it, that's not the way that it's going to work for us, that we really need to focus on going back to the cultural practices of making sure that we look after our children and our families. So the Carcross-Tagish First Nation Constitution, we ratified that in 1997. I was actually just young at that time when it was ratified. I was a teenager. I was really grateful to hear the youth speak this morning because I didn't realize it at the time, but I was involved in what we called the Clan Governance Research Project, and I was only 17 years old at the time, but what I did not realize was that that was the foundational work that we were going to use to move from a traditional DIA system of governance to one that is based on our own traditional values and principles. Representatives from each of our 6 clans. We do have 6 clans in the Carcross-Tagish First Nation, and every single one of our governing branches and bodies that we have we are appointed and we are not elected. The only position that we do have elected is our Hashaduhen. And so each clan has the ability to put forward anybody that they feel would be best representing them on these governing bodies. And my First Nation, well, my clan has asked that I sit as the Judicial Council rep. So I've been serving as the Ishkatan Judicial Council rep since 1997. And it's nice to see that I actually have a few of the Judicial Council members with me here today. It's been a long go with us. Our First Nation has been working very hard at trying to incorporate these traditional ways in how we govern and structure ourselves. So our Carcross-Tagish First Nation Judicial Council is comprised of 6 members. We get our authorities from our Constitution, and we are established under our Constitution. And like I had said, everyone is appointed, so they're not elected positions. And the procedures and authorities of the Judicial Council shall be established by a CTFN law. So we've only been currently back trying to get everything in place for the last 3 years. So as you can see, and we talked about, things take a long time. We've already established our terms of reference. We're working on a multi-year funding arrangement with our First Nation because we are supposed to be at arm's length from our government. And we are currently going to start developing our Judicial Act, which will guide how we are going to be resolving conflict and upholding CTFN's laws and Constitution. So the Judicial Council is responsible for interpreting the Constitution and CTFN laws. We are responsible for hearing and deciding all cases of alleged violation of CTFN laws. We are to hear, mediate, adjudicate, and settle disputes or petitions for redress in relation to Carcross-Tagish First Nation law. And we incorporate our traditional beliefs and values in our administration of justice. So moving forward, like I said, we have put 30 years, well, I have personally put 30 years in, but the whole 50 years of modern treaties, we have done a lot of work already, and there's still a lot of work yet that needs to be completed. And I'm just so grateful that I'm actually able to be part of all of these processes. So we currently have a number of CTFN laws, like I spoke about, and I don't have them all here, but like I said, you can go and check us out on our CTFN website. Each one of those documents are listed in there as well, too. And moving forward, as part of our justice and part of our law development, we are looking at future policy development to implement our Family Act. I currently sit as a community representative, so I help to draft the law, create a family council, sit on the family council, now try to implement the Family Act. So it's a lifelong journey for sure, and I'd imagine that we're going to be in this process still for quite some time. We are looking, as I had mentioned earlier, that we are developing our Judicial Act. We're going to start beginning the development of that within the next year. The ladies also spoke of their governance code that they are working on for Trondek, and Carcross-Tagish First Nation actually has a draft governance code that we are working on as well right now, and hopefully that will be passed shortly. I know the first draft was already circulated throughout the different governing bodies. We still need to continue finalizing drafting our Financial Administration Act, and part of the takedown of child welfare or implementation of our Family Act, there's a possibility through our self-government agreements that we would be able to do a program and service transfer agreement. And Carcross-Tagish First Nation would like to probably more along the lines do a phased-in approach. I know that it's a lot of First Nation communities suffer with a lack of capacity and all kinds of resources that we need in order to complete the work that we need to do. So this is still another part that it's going to take some time to figure out how we're going to take down this huge endeavor of child welfare. Currently, as it sits right now, Carcross-Tagish First Nation, because we do not have an administration of justice agreement, we have not entered into that. I know that Teslin has. I see representatives here as well for Teslin Tlingit Council. So on the interim, we are kind of piggybacking on the Yukon government's courts to be able to uphold any of CTFN laws. But with the establishment and the advancement of our Judicial Council, we will be able to start taking care of that ourselves. So on the interim, we are using the Yukon government's territorial courts if we need that to be able to uphold any of CTFN's laws. So I'm really excited about the work that needs to be done. I'm really glad that we have dedicated people in our community, and our leadership and our First Nation and the people that I work with at Judicial Council and Family Council are working very diligently to try and get these pieces of legislation up and running so that we can continue to do the good work that we need to do to move our nation forward. Thank you. Ganesh Jish.
Thank you very much, Crystal. Again, that was amazing. We often think about our laws and our ways in relation to how we're going to care for our lands and resources coming from a place of our own values and principles, and talking about that in terms of how we bring that back to care for our people as well is such an important aspect. So I'm really so encouraged and really pumped about the work that you're all doing. We've been in Treaty My Community, My Nation for the last 15 years, and to see how long this takes to develop, I think, is a really important part of what you're all helping us to bring forward, and appreciate what you're offering to the group in terms of the knowledge and the experiences that you've had. With that, I'm going to welcome our last speaker on the panel, David Joe. People don't always know that they mentor people from afar. I've watched you for many years and admired the work that you've done, David, over so many years, and always really, really happy to hear you speak, and happy to welcome you up to the stage today. Thank you.
Thank you for those very kind words, Angela. I want to tell you a story. I don't have a PowerPoint. When my grandmother told me stories when I was a young boy, she would say, "Ashia and Daho, come here, grandchild." And I would sit on her lap, and she didn't say, "All right, now we're going to turn on the TV," or she didn't say, "Now we're going to watch this PowerPoint and you're going to learn something." She told me a story, and I had to learn from those stories that she told me. So I'm going to tell you this story in my work with the Teslin Tlingit Council. Their story, of course, is an ancient story. They've occupied their territories in Yukon and in northern BC since time out of mind, as they say. And as part of their inherent right to self-government, they had customs, they had, of course, laws, languages, Tlingit, and maybe Tagish as well. And from these customs and stories, they had a legal system in place. When I spoke this morning about the fact that we did have a final agreement, we also have an agreement on self-government. Neither the final agreement or the agreement on self-government extinguished, released, or ceded any of these ancient customs and rights that the Tlingit people had. There was no release of the inherent right of self-government. There was no release of the inherent right to the administration of justice, or indeed their justice systems. Those are still in place. So instead of attempting to prove these rights in court, if you were to go to court right now on the inherent right of self-government, you'd have to jump through about 4 hoops. One, you had to show that the law that you wanted to occupy, in this case the administration of justice, existed at time of contact. So the question becomes, when was the time of contact? For many of us, it happened sort of vicariously. We saw guns before we saw the Gujjan, as we say, the white man who began trading on the coast, and then the guns came to the interior. So you have to prove that the right existed at time of contact. So that's always hard to pin down. Secondly, the right had to be central and integral to your society, to your tribe, to your nation. And that's a requirement that the court now sort of defines it as, central and integral. And of course, justice would fit within that. You've just heard couple of examples about values and how it's central and integral to their way of life. Third thing that you would have to prove is that your laws, your inherent right laws over the administration of justice in this case, was not justifiably infringed upon by laws of, in our case, Yukon and or Canada and or BC. And if it survives those tests at the end of the day, you've met that test until either Canada or Yukon or BC changes their statutory laws to justify the infringement. So rather than go through that unshaky common law process, the agreement that we made with Canada, with the Teslin Tlingit Council and all Yukon First Nations, we basically said, let's agree that we have the administration of justice as part of our paramount concurrent jurisdiction as a function of our agreement on self-government with respect to our treaty lands. And it would permeate throughout our traditional territories by the passage of our laws, and indeed throughout the Yukon Territory over matters like childcare, social programs, healthcare, education, and the list goes on. So if there's any conflict between our laws and the laws of Yukon, our laws would be paramount. If there's any conflict with an area of federal jurisdiction, our laws would be paramount. And if there was any question, there's a process to determine whose law would be paramount. The First Nations law, the Teslin Tlingit law, or the law of Canada. So as part of the story, when we reached those final agreements and that agreement on self-government in 1995, a year after the Teslin Tlingit Council wrote to Canada and to Yukon saying that we want to negotiate an agreement on the administration of justice. And we wanted to embark upon that process. And they accepted. They said, fine, let's do it. It's never been done before in this fashion, but let's sit down and talk. 5 years later, in 2001, we developed and signed a framework agreement. And the framework agreement basically sets out the topics that the party would address during negotiations and sort of the period of time, who would pay for it, et cetera, et cetera. So it laid out a clear process. And it was a 3-stage process. And in the 3rd stage, we were supposed to address something that the Supreme Court of Canada has spoken to, which is the application of the Charter. Because our laws, Tlingit laws, do not arrive in the normal course. It's something that's inherent. Your customary laws are inherent, and they aren't given by way of statute. And so essentially, the process that the parties had agreed to was recognized under the framework agreement, including the application of the Charter, or whether or not the Charter applies. Because the Charter system, as you know, arose in 1215 with the signing of the Magna Carta, and then the Bill of Rights in 1789 in the States, and the Bill of Rights in Canada in 1960, which gave us the right to vote. And they adopted a charter and said, all of these basic rights will apply to you as well. Even though it's not your value system, they will apply to you. And the Supreme Court pronounced that judgment in the Yukon, or in the Supreme Court of Canada about 2 years ago in a case from the Yukon. And so it sort of preempted what the parties had agreed to talk about through the phased approach. Be that as it may, after we got the framework agreement in 2001, 10 years later, we agreed on the first component of the administration of justice, which was the courts. We said we want the authority to adjudicate on our own laws. We want the establishment of courts. Canada and Yukon agreed. Canada paid us for the funding for that. And in 2011 was the establishment, the recognition of the court process. And we called it the Peacemaker Court, the Teslin Tlingit Peacemaker Court. And it currently is now established. We got funding for that. And it's been in effect. We did have to pass a statute to establish the court. It's called the Teslin Tlingit Peacemaker Court Act. And we also had to pass a Justice Council law to make sure that the people that sat on the court were neutral and subscribed to all of those values of neutrality. And so that process has been in effect since 2011. We've got the funding for that component. And then recently, as I recall, around 2018, we signed the enforcement component. Our officers, our peace officers, who generally would have the authority of a peace officer so they could carry sidearms to enforce any of the Teslin Tlingit statutory laws, or indeed laws of Yukon that may occur on treaty lands where Yukon agrees with that. And thirdly, indeed laws of Canada, like select criminal code offenses as well, if Canada agrees. So that process was agreed to in 2018, and just recently, about 2 weeks ago, we signed an agreement in Teslin with Yukon and Canada for the third component on corrections and community services. And now, so we're about 3/4 of the way there in making agreements, ensuring that our laws are consistent with the agreements that we have put in place. We are now beginning to work on the fourth component, dealing with community safety and policing, just to complete the circle of our authority. Now, that one will take probably a longer period of time. Someone said, we live in very uncertain times. We don't know what the policies of Canada are going to be in 6 months, 12 months. Trump is threatening to impose tariffs upon Canada. That's going to have a recessionary effect on the ability of Canada to live up to our treaty terms, to live up to what they have committed to, not only in the AJA agreement that we have, but for the totality of the agreements on self-government themselves. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but we are committed to completing the agreements with our treaty partners, and we look forward to that. And a lot of our systems, traditions, laws are based on Tlingit values. Hakusti'i underpins how they live with respect to all of the laws that they have put into place. And so that is currently where Teslin Tlingit Council are within the process. There is a lot of more work to do. We are beginning to train now, as I speak, our enforcement officers to give them the capacity to enforce, firstly, Tlingit statutory law, maybe Tlingit customary law, maybe laws of Yukon, laws of Canada, where the parties agree within the jurisdiction of the treaty lands themselves. And so it's a very exciting time for Teslin Tlingit Council, and it's a very exciting time for a person like myself who had the honor to work with the Teslin Tlingit people, and certainly I look forward to concluding those aspects. Knock on wood, hopefully I'll live for another 10 more years, and I look forward to speaking to you all again at some point in time. So thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Dave. It's so easy to say, we just want to incorporate our laws into the way we do business. 30 years later, 30 years into it, for all of you, you've woven an amazing story for us in terms of thinking through all the work that needs to get done to start to do that in a real way. Andrew was just up here a while ago and talking about how long it takes to develop your government and get back to who we were or who we should have been had we not had interruptions in practicing who we are and where we come from. So I really appreciate it. I think we all hear the commonalities of the work that we're doing in our communities and how we hope to get back and continue to work and struggle as we will continue to get back to being able to govern ourselves based on who we are and where we come from. So many words of our elders, I think, come flooding back to us as we listen to the presentations today, talking about starting by identifying our principles, our values, and our visions, and who we are and where we come from. When I first started working with my own tribal council, I heard that again and again and again and again and again from our elders, that it's so important for us to do that. And the aspects of language that we heard so much today too, and being able to translate who we are and where we come from into today's world, and how do we explain even some of those very complex stories and histories and ways of being that we have as a people. So it's no small task, and really it's always so nice to hear it laid out in a way that, you know, step by step by step by step, we're going to get back to where it is that we started from. So I really appreciate all of that. So I'm taking a bit of time here, reminding you all we've got some times for questions, and there's a mic up in the middle here, so I'm going to ramble on a little bit longer while anybody who comes up who has a question. So just to continue that, I'm talking about the principles, the values, and the vision, and the commonalities of that. In my own nation, we talk about isak, respect being the basis of everything that we do. Hishuk matsawak, everything is one, everything is interconnected, that all of you talked about as well. And u'atlak, taking care of, making sure we're taking care of our territories, our people, everything that's important to us. And how do we learn about those? What we heard very clearly, all of you saying, is it comes from our stories. It comes from understanding who we are and where we come from. And reflecting back on the words that we heard from our youth today, they are dying to do this. And it just gave me such hope that they're so encouraged and so excited about learning about that and looking to those of you who have been doing this for all your lives so that they can carry that on and make sure that that continues to happen. So I was very encouraged by all of that. So from that, how do we take that into our contemporary system? In our community, in our constitution, and our motto in our community is ancient spirit, modern mind. How do we bring those things together? That's what we got into treaty for, to take it back and to do things our way, recognizing that we've got to do that in a very contemporary world today. And then building that infrastructure, the governments, the commissions, the judicial systems, all of those kind of things, lots and lots of work. And we really raise our hands to those who are doing that work that will help all of us. Paying it forward is one of the biggest things that happens in modern treaty nations. So really appreciate all of your presentations and the continued work that needs to get done, Dave. So please join me in thanking for the presentations, and then we'll move into some questions. Thank you all so much for that. Is there anybody who's got a question for anyone on the panel, or would just like to make some comments about things that are happening in your communities? Oh, Crystal. Just let us know who you are and where you come from. And there's microphones up here for all the panel members, anybody who wants to respond.
It's intimidating on this stage, and I didn't even have to present. Good afternoon, Uklama, Crystal Jack, and I'm here, my main hat while I'm here is with Hawaiian First Nations. My question is for anyone who wants to answer. I suspect you all have really great stories for this question. How do you build in, or could you share an example of, building in succession planning or mentorship or knowledge transfer into this work? Much like any long-term and complex project, it's a series of relays, not a single person marathon, and I would love to hear some advice or examples of successes in passing torches as you go. Clicko, clicko.
Thank you, Crystal. Good question. Any one of you want to take that on? Go ahead.
To see. Oh, it's working. That's a really important and a great question. And I think, you know, with this work, just recognizing that it has been a long journey so far. And we have just, you know, for the Trondikwitchin specific, and I imagine the same in other, you know, in Karkros-Tegish First Nation and so forth around that. We've been continuing to do workshops in our community and outside of community to continue for this process to unfold and empower as many citizens as we can in and out of community to continue this great work. We have a youth, not meaning to, I recognise her over there in the corner, Jim Moreau, who was a part of the work going to University of Victoria to do the workshops, and it's a part of just continuing, and in all ages. We also have our Deputy Chief, who is also a part of this process, and we're continuing to do this work ongoing.
Thank you. There's mics in front of each of you as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, what we had spoke about earlier is passage of laws and knowledge was always done orally. I think it's really fabulous today that we have the ability to be able to write our laws and not just speaking them. In Karkros-Tegish First Nation, we have used our traditional law development as part of even our curriculum development in our schools and about educating the students on traditional law and traditional roles and responsibilities. When it comes to child welfare, and our Family Act, about how we're going to, all of our programming will be developed based on our traditional practices and our values. And in a way, it is a kind of a form of passing the torch. So I think it's really great that we now have the ability to be able to document everything, to record these histories, and to be able to take the words from from the elders that I heard back in the day that are no longer here, and keeping those stories still alive and to be able to share that with the youth, and especially the youth that were here today. I was just so extremely proud of the way that they spoke, and I thought, holy, she jumped up here on a whim and spoke so eloquently about how she wants to be able to help advance her First Nation and just trying to support the youth and to be able to pass that torch on.
Yep, there's a mic in front of you there. He said he'll watch. We got the mic on for Dave? Test.
So bright up here,
There you go. I know, you can't see.
like we're driving into a sunset. Or you all look like movie stars, I guess that's it. But succession planning is so key and so important. Like my work with the Teslin Tlingit Council, they are based like Carcross on a clan system. And they have a youth council in the executive, and they also sit on the general council, and they equally have an elders council as well for all 5. And so the youth are mentored throughout those processes, and so they learn. It's a learning experience for them to sit in the houses of their government and just to learn, because to transfer knowledge about customs and laws and traditions is never a finished job. You're always doing it in some form, some fashion. And I think that the traditional processes that the Teslin and Tlingit had in place is time-tested. It ensures that the youth learn what their roles are, and they are groomed throughout those processes. And so, but it's a very onerous responsibility to make sure that you've got that bench strength to carry on for years to come.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much. Interest and enthusiasm is the first step. Grab them all as soon as they show interest, and educate them is what I'm hearing. Make sure you mentor them and give them the tools and give them the space that they need to be involved. Other question?
We can see you. Koe kakena, Nejis Mekas Elizabeth Logue. My name is Elizabeth Logue. Nejunjaba Kirigenzi Bianishnabeg. So welcome to the territory. I presently work at Justice Canada on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But so listening to everybody's story, I was just kind of noting like the hybridness of like bringing in Supreme Court decisions and then other, pushing back on colonial systems, but then also sort of how do you kind of work with it when needed or not needed. But I just wanted to know if anybody had any thoughts around, has the UN declaration, could it help? Does it hinder? Is it even a factor in the day-to-day life of what you do? So that's it's just a little question.
Just a
Jimmy
little
Gwetch.
question. We'll have Dave will start. Thanks.
Yeah, in my view, I think UNDRIP, so-called, has been described by the Supreme Court of Canada. If you put any stock in trade in the Supreme Court of Canada and what they say that UNDRIP is now part of the positive law of Canada. But they don't clarify that. So I assume that those principles that are articulated within that document will be a guide going forward in terms of how they construe the rights that we've got, both in the common law and within the statutory law of Canada. And so it certainly is untested yet, but I think there is room to interpret the laws of Canada, laws of the provinces or of the territories in a fashion that's consistent with the principles that are contained in that international document, now incorporated into the statutes of Canada and in BC. And so it is a very exciting time. I do know the Quebec Superior Court, for example, looked at the principles from that document and begin to incorporate them to even change the common law tests about whether or not our rights should be consistent with the principles that are contained within that document. So I think it's a very exciting time, and I think it's a progressive move for the courts to do that, and I'm certainly glad that Canada did recognize and adopt those as part of the laws of Canada in 2021.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Anyone else? Okay. Leave that one for the lawyers. Thank you very much, Dave. Other questions? Well, if there's no other questions, do we have any closing thoughts from the panel, having heard each other? Oh, was there another question? Yeah, please.
I don't know if this is going to be a question, but I think it's an issue that we're all going to have to deal with. And I know, having worked with at least one panel member, I hope you'll and others will think about addressing this issue. And I understand all the governance responsibilities and those things that are in the umbrella final agreement and some of the self-government agreements. But I'm getting a bit, my name is Richard Narasu. I'm from the Northwest Territories, from the Gwich'in Nation in the NWT. But I'm getting a bit concerned about the whole issue of how governments are, especially in the North, are approaching the notion of co-management and what that really means. There are certain authorities that have been given, and I'm just thinking back to a bit of the spirit and intent at the time that agreements were negotiated, and a lot of it had to do with the idea of, in many respects, of co-governing all the lands within our areas, not specifically to those lands that we considered our settlement lands. It was much broader in terms of the approach of being part of the decisions that affected the lands and the activities that happened on all our traditional lands. And so for me, I'm kind of worried about that, because I'm seeing governments in the North thinking that their jurisdiction is absolute control. And I don't think that that was really the objective. It was about shared management in the sense of co-governance, because there's a recognition that First Nations have governments, and they in fact have been implemented. So I'm hoping maybe someone would address that issue, or at least in the coalition, that we start to address that issue and recognize that we need to maybe think about this whole notional idea of co-management and really have a good conversation about co-governance on all our traditional lands. What that might mean would be about the recognition of First Nations rights and interests, because even in the agreements that we do have, there's sections that deal with the whole issue of ensuring that our rights are not impacted by any decisions that are made. So I just wanted to make that comment, because it does have a significant impact on our ability to manage, monitor, have oversight and be part of the decision-making on any activities that happen on our land, not just simply resource development, but any other activities that impact the rights and interests of our people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent question. I think it's something we all talk about, co-management, and maybe we could have it addressed from a couple of ways, a bit from a legal perspective, and also maybe how communities or nations have been thinking about that in developing that work and how laws might apply outside of treaty settlement lands or our lands.
Hello? That's actually quite interesting what that gentleman was just speaking about there. And even as a self-governing First Nation, my First Nation has actually had to go to court over certain breaches of our agreements. So even though we've all signed these agreements together and we wanted to try and implement them together and work together, it doesn't always happen that way, and that is another big challenge. And it's what I find really unfair and unfortunate is that once we sign our agreements, we were all given compensation dollars. Well, that's where we're paying for the court, right? Like it's, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done when it comes to creating and maintaining these relationships between the different government levels. But even within our First Nation, I work with a group of nice ladies even at the historic sites. You know, that's a co-management plan that we have in certain specific areas in our traditional territory that we've already agreed to work together on, and that relationship is wonderful, you know? So there's always going to be times and opportunities where things might not always work that way, but as long as we keep trying to continue to move forward in a good way, I think we'll all get where we want to be, so.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Masi Cho for that question. I think it's a really great question. And even when I look at this slide in front of me with successes and challenges, and I've only been doing this for 4 years or so, but I think what we presented on is, you know, these successes. I think this is Trondikwatin exercising that authority to create laws. But, you know, the whole other side of the coin, for me at least as a negotiator, is this co-management piece. And so when I think about, I actually really like doing the work that we presented on today because it is rewarding and it's challenging, but at least feels like you're getting somewhere. And I think, you know, the other part of the work that I do, which is more on treaty relationships and working with our treaty partners, it's really difficult because I think there's a huge education component that comes with it, and that's taking, again, in my short time doing it, a long time to get there. I feel like sometimes we're just, you know, speaking different languages. I find when we're trying to get somewhere, it's taking years to even get, you know, a treaty partner to the same place that we're starting from. So I guess I would just label that as a challenge, an ongoing challenge, but I agree with you that it's something that we should really all be thinking about more collectively on how we get there, because it's a huge part of the treaty. It was a huge promise. So, Masi Cho.
Thank you. Dave? Would you like to
I was just having a quiet, reflective moment there. But I think there's 3 things that you can do to have that degree of co-management. Firstly, I say to the treaty partners, implement the agreements, right? Like if there's a land use plan, planning chapter, implement that in the territory to reduce the degree of development conflict that's going to arise. So do that. If there's a chapter on a development assessment, implement that in the spirit and intent by which the parties had agreed to it. Secondly, where there are express terms in the treaty to consult, big C consult, right? That's defined under the treaty in areas like co-management or who has the authority to manage resources, water, etc. Look at those terms, and if you are required to consult any of the 3 parties, generally to a treaty table, then consult, fulfill the term and intention behind that. Thirdly, if there's any doubt about the fact that Crown activity or Crown-approved activity initiated by a third party, like a mining company, if they fail to comply with the honor of the Crown, the duty to consult and the duty to accommodate where the interests of the First Nations, or First Nations, plural, I guess, is going to be impacted, then fulfill the honor of the Crown. Fourthly, if there's an express breach of a principle of UNDRIP, like if there's a requirement to obtain the consent of a First Nation that is based upon free, prior, and informed consent, get that consent, or try to get that consent. So I think, generally speaking, not all of the answers are contained within the treaty agreements per se, but there's a lot of the instruments that exist outside of the treaties, and I've referred to at least two of them, that the parties could use constructively and effectively to embrace constructive co-management in the First Nations territory that may be impacted by any adverse activities.
Thank you very much. Lots of tools to continue to use, and also heard the recommendation and request that this is something that we continue to talk about at this level among LCAC as well. Thank you very much for the question and the responses from the panel. We are down to our last minute. I'm just going to ask our panelists if you have any closing things that you'd like to say. Is there still one more question? I'm sorry. Okay, last question.
Hi.
Yeah, you can't even see people. Sorry.
My name's Leslie Colley. I'm with Carcross Tagish First Nation Judicial Council. I'm Ducklawitty rep. And right now, I've been wondering, judicial versus justice. We had chosen judicial because we don't do any criminal cases or anything to do with that side right now. But I was curious, Dave, how would Teslin maintain and grow trust with all of their people, First Nation and non-First Nation within there? And knowing that, in a sense, the RCMP is the biggest gang in Canada, who would be doing the training, and how would you keep that level of trust and integrity for all of the people? Because other First Nations, CTFN included, would be watching to see how it unfolds. And yeah, thank you.
I think on the topic of trust, I think these institutions that we're talking about are not new. They are ancient. They are based upon ancient values that have been time tested. And so implicitly, the Tlingit people generally trust how they've modeled their customs in a contemporary form. And so I think, generally speaking, there's trust there. There is, I think, a lack of understanding from the non-Tlingit people who don't fully appreciate all of those values that have been time tested. And so there's some teaching that has to be done there for sure, and some work in public with the other people that reside in the Yukon Territory, and indeed perhaps with even some of our own citizens would require that as well. With respect to the RCMP, it's not our intention when we go into policing to simply say we will assume the jurisdiction over policing in an RCMP context. That is not our intention. Instead, the intention is to build policing based upon, again, those time-tested principles of how we took care of our communities, our people, our lands, etc. And so all of those concepts have existed in time. We just have to refashion them in a way that relates to what I would term modern society. And I think that will take some time for sure. And so it is the intention to develop during the interim period community safety officers, which are different than the RCMP, to ensure safety, but still infuse them with comparable powers to that of like the RCMP without being the RCMP themselves. Because the RCMP, of course, are an instrument of the colonial powers that have suppressed us. And so it's obvious that we are not going to fashion, I don't think, our policing community safety aspects after the RCMP. But clearly that's an option. Some people may want to do that, but that clearly is an option out there for policing.
Thank you very much for the question and for that response, Dave. I think it sort of brought it around to the end of your discussion where you talked about the work that still needed to be done. While we're doing all this work, we still need to create that environment of safety in our communities, so we've got to be considering that as we're moving forward. So we've done great for time. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and please join me once again in thanking this esteemed panel for joining us and sharing such wonderful information. Klecko, thank you. Oh, I'm told that it's break time until 3:15. I'm to thank Bird Construction for sponsoring the coffee and the networking session that's happening up until 3:15. And all of you can check your apps and look for your next breakout groups and head to those rooms at 3:15 for prompt starts, as our MC Aluki would say. Thank you very much. Enjoy the break, enjoy the networking session, and thank you again to our panel.